Hi, class. Welcome back. We're reading The Family Under the Bridge, and we're going to begin with Chapter 3. If you remember at the end of Chapter 2, Armand is going to take the children to meet Father Christmas. Armand, the Paris hobo, led the red-headed children up the steps to the busy city above. His old mind under his old beret was busy with great plans for the children and himself. Perhaps the starlings weren't too bad. They had their uses. He walked ahead, leading the way across the bridge and around Notre Dame. Susie followed, with Evelyn clinging to her hand. Sometimes Paul lagged to look at something. Sometimes he ran ahead to talk with the hobo. The dog that should have been white trotted along at Susie's worn-down heels. They straggled across the bridge that tied the island back to the right bank. The children turned to stare at all the fancy towers and turrets on the roof of the Hôtel de Ville. "That's the City Hall, where they run Paris," explained Armand. "I could run it better from under the bridge." Blue pigeons fluttered around them hopefully. "Beggars," snorted the tramp, "always pestering folks for a handout." Jojo felt the same way. He chased away any that alighted too close to the children. "I wish we had some corn to feed them," said Paul. "See what I mean?" asked Armand. "Even people who haven't any food themselves are ready to feed the pigeons. Wish I was one." They walked through a dreary cobbled street until they reached the busy Rue de Rivoli. It was crowded with holiday shoppers. Christmas was really getting close to the business street. Vendors behind sidewalk stands were bawling out their wares and imploring passerby to examine their merchandise. Shoppers were buying earrings and suspenders and water softeners and silk scarves from the vendors. They were buying frantically and noisily, as if they might never again find anything for sale on the Rue de Rivoli. And the way they were madly buying, perhaps there wouldn't be anything left on the street the next day. It's a picture. Armand was continually having to turn around and coax the children along. They wanted to stop and look at everything. They stopped to stare at a mechanical soldier that a man was demonstrating on the sidewalk. The soldier marched and saluted smartly. It took some time to get Paul away from the soldier. "Cheap toy," scoffed Armand. "Take it home and it won't work, or the spring will break the first time it's wound. A friend of mine used to sell those things." No sooner had he coaxed them away from the mechanical toy than that they came to a bakery shop. There was a Christmas log cake in the window. Such a delicious log. It was chocolatey brown with fancy mushrooms popping from its sweet bark. Pink spun sugar roses grew out of the chocolate too, and such a real-looking ivy vine twined around it, spreading luscious green leaves. "Oh, doesn't it look good?" exclaimed Susie, licking her lips. "I could eat it all by myself," cried Paul. "I'm hungry," whined Evelyn. Armand pulled at each one in turn. "It really tastes like medicine," he said. "All but the vine. That tastes exactly like ivy, tough and bitter. I ate a Christmas log once." The children did not look as if they believed him. "It's a tricky way they have of getting children to take medicine," he insisted. They crossed the street when the policeman stopped the line of automobiles. They came to a big iron brazier where a man was selling hot chestnuts as fast as he could roast them. The air was warm around the brazier, and the smell of the chestnuts was tantalizing. The children stopped and looked hungrily into the brazier. "Come, come," said Armand impatiently. "Chestnuts are wormy. Do you think Father Christmas is going to wait until midnight for us? We've still got a long way to the Louvre." But there was so much to see that the way seemed quite short. Soon they were walking through the street arcades of the store buildings, and it seemed that as much was being sold outside as in, with all the pushcarts and street hawkers. Armand shepherded his little flock through one of the great glass doors of which the store was so proud. When the children and the dog were once inside, they felt transported into a fairyland. It was warm and beautiful in the great store, with its bright lights and moving colors. There was an odor of mixed perfumes, as if all the flowers in the world were blooming behind the counters that were covered with soft clothing and glittering jewels. "We have to go up to the mezzanine," said Armand. "Might as well use the elevator and save our feet for the walk back." So they went to the nearest elevator, but all the people waiting could not possibly crowd into it at the same time. "We'll have to take the steps," decided Armand. "Wouldn't you think some of those women would stay home and do their washing and cooking?" "Our mother would if she could," said Susie quickly. They climbed the stairs. The children's eyes grew dreamier and dreamier. They saw tables piled high with toys. They were entering the domain of Father Christmas. On tiptoe, reverently, they followed the old hobo to the studio, where a child could have his picture taken with the saint, providing his parents had paid for it. Armand peeped in. The children stopped breathing. "He's not here," said the hobo in a disappointed voice. But even as he spoke, Father Christmas himself came around the counters. He was dressed in a long red robe that reached his ankles, and a curly white beard covered his chest. His mustache was waved and waxed, but his black eyes were snapping as he shook his fist at two boys running ahead of him. "And if I catch you playing with the electric trains again, I'll put you out of the store," he threatened them. The Calcette children were frightened. They shrank behind Armand, and as Father Christmas approached them, Evelyn burst into frightened tears, and Jojo growled. At the sight of Armand, the angry lines left the forehead of Father Christmas and blithely curled around his lips. His eyes softened with pleasure and amusement. "Ho, ho, ho!" he laughed in the way that Father Christmas should laugh. "Look at whose dear old grandpapa has come to see me today." And he went on with his "ho, ho, ho," until the children were afraid he had had a coughing spell. Armand pulled the little Calcettes in front of him, one by one. Evelyn stopped crying and Jojo stopped growling. "You'd never believe where I found them," said Armand, "but they wanted to come to see you." The children's eyes were shining again. They were speechless with delight. "Have you been good children this year?" asked Father Christmas. "We've tried to be," parried Susie. "Sometimes we get mixed up about what's good and what isn't," confessed Paul. "I pull Jojo's tail, but I won't do it anymore," confessed Evelyn. Father Christmas was pleased. "I like truthful children," he said. "All the rest of them declare they've been angels all year. Now, what do you want me to bring you for Christmas?" "We want a house," said Susie. "Will you please bring us a house, Father Christmas?" "Ho, ho, ho," replied Father Christmas. "That should be agreeable to your parents. And what kind of house do you want? A doll house?" He glanced at Jojo. "Or a dog house?" "A real house," said Paul. "A house we can live in." "With walls and a roof," said Susie. "And windows," added Evelyn. "I like to watch out the windows when it's time for Susie and Paul to come home from school." Father Christmas stopped his jolly ho, 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 and stared at them. "Who ever heard of children wanting a real house for Christmas?" he asked. "What about a drum for the lad and dolls for you girls?" "No," insisted Susie. "It has to be a real house." Father Christmas rolled his black eyes around and twirled the ends of his mustache. "It will have to be dolls or games," he said. "My little donkey can't carry a house on his back. You know that." The children's faces fell. Then Susie remembered her manners. "Thank you anyway, Father Christmas," she said in a quivering voice. I guess we don't want anything but a house." "I do," said Paul. "I want something to eat." "And I want a doll," added Evelyn. Father Christmas started to speak, but a pretty salesgirl interrupted him. You better get into the studio, or Monsieur Latour will fire you, she said. There are 4 children waiting to have their pictures taken. Father Christmas patted each red head in farewell. Then he said to Armand, Our Monsieur Latour is looking for night watchmen for a friend's building. You want the job? Oh la la, exclaimed Armand. I didn't come here to ask Father Christmas for a job. Goodbye, Camille. He led the children down the steps again, but now they were strangely quiet. Even Jojo's ears had drooped and his tail dragged. The main floor was less crowded as they walked between the counters. An elegant floor walker caught sight of the vagabonds. He hurried to them. He made a little noise as he tapped the immaculately white handkerchief peeping from his breast pocket. Aren't you in the wrong store? He asked haughtily. I should say we're in the wrong store, replied Armand just as haughtily. We brought our dog in here to ride the escalators, and all I see are those crowded elevators. He whistled to Jojo. Come on, boy, we'll take you over to Printemps. Jojo growled at the haughty floor walker. The little group headed for the great glass door of which the store was so proud. They shivered as they stepped out into the cold, biting air. In this chapter, they call the store proud. There seems to be a theme. Remember that in the first chapter, it was the mother who was proud, or the second chapter, it was the mother who was proud. And now we're describing the store as being proud. What do you think? Can a building be proud? How can a building be proud? Think about that. I'll see you next time.